It's crazy to think that this game, a game that absolutely came out of nowhere, is out and about and in public hands alongside next generation consoles. It's even crazier that this review is even a thing. Life is definitely strange sometimes. I thought I was done with YouTube reviews altogether after Web of Shadows. I thought I had reached my apex, and after 10 plus years of doing this YouTube thing, was prepared to move on from it all after finally reviewing all of the Spider-Man games released until this point. Then, something happened. A reaction video I had no intention of putting up reluctantly made its way on the internet, and it blew up pretty big, to the tune of near 1 million views on Twitter alone, eclipsing anything I've ever done here on YouTube put together. I believe this is the reason why I was able to get an early copy of this game, courtesy of the folks over at PlayStation, Marvel, and Insomniac Games. Even though some of the folks over at Insomniac Games were big fans of my combat videos, I highly doubt that that alone would allow for something like this to happen to someone like me, who, while not the smallest channel in the world, is pretty small in comparison to the other Spider-Man content creator juggernauts who have eclipsed me in a shorter amount of time. It's for this reason I have to thank all of you guys who shared, commented, and liked the video and reached out to me and told me how touched you were in my reaction. I never in a million years would have thought that something I would have done would have resonated with so many people, and I doubt that all of this would have happened without you guys. A special shout out also has to go out to several Insomniacs who reached out to me after the video was shared within the team. Thank you to Mary Kenny, Melissa, Tim, James, Stevenson and Ham, Adam C, Josh, Jen, DSalary9487, who actually commented on the YouTube video itself, and of course Brian Horton himself, who DM'd me on Twitter and had a pleasant exchange of words with alongside other Insomniacs I may and probably am forgetting. It truly means a lot. Spider-Man Miles Morales, while a shorter game than its 2018 massive blockbuster hit, is in almost every way a better game than its predecessor, from its heartwarming story about family, friendship, fitting in, community, and becoming yourself, to its insane amount of detail and care put into cultural representation on both sides of Miles' ethnicity, to the outstanding job on animations on all fronts. It's insane how good this game is on such a short turnaround from the 2018 game, and with production being affected by the pandemic. But that just goes to show you how good of a foundation the original game had to build upon, and just how talented the team at Insomniac Games is. Think about this. They essentially had to build 4 versions of this game. Fidelity on PS5 and Performance mode, while also the base PS4 and PS4 Pro versions, which is what I'm playing on. I couldn't get my hands on the PS5, guys, I'm sorry. Their QA team deserves massive kudos. That's an insane amount of work. It's so good I'm having a really hard time going back to the original 2018 game, because while there are some things that game does better, I feel Miles overall is just more fun to play. We're going to be starting off with some plot stuff, and don't worry about spoilers here, folks. I won't be spoiling anything that hasn't already been put out there by the developers or the marketing. I will, however, talk about certain characters and how much more I enjoy them in this game than I do in their debut. And this is pretty much going to be about Miles and Rio Morales, voiced and performance captured by Najee Jeter and Jacqueline Pinol, as a majority of the cast are all debuting in this game. One of the biggest gripes I had with both characters is how one-note they were in Spider-Man PS4. Rio sounded absolutely nothing like a Spanish mother living in New York, and Miles sounded like a black kid trying to sound white, and I know I'm not alone in feeling that. While there was nothing wrong with their performances in that game per se, it lacked a certain level of authenticity that Into the Spider-Verse heavily exposed them on, and I'm pretty sure was the catalyst of really pushing forward with the heavy cultural and ethnic representation in this game. In that game, they essentially had no character outside of having names associated with the characters that they were portraying. And while I understand that that was Peter's game, first impressions matter, and when you feel characters just exist to serve out purpose in a story, with no character being put behind them, it can feel disheartening, especially when it's meant to be your people being represented, but they're not, at least not accurately. But in this game, they're vastly improved in how they communicate with one another, and how they interact not just with other characters, but the world around them. From cell phone conversations Rio is having, to how she talks to Miles in Spanglish or scolds him from lying, and how Miles not only looks more authentic to how a black teenager would dress in New York, but just his overall mannerisms and the things he does, or as that one guy from GameSpot put it,
just full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
What the hell does that even mean? Or how he talks in response to things. Whenever a grenade is being thrown, there's a chance of him yelling out yeet, or if you manage to execute a spectacular level or above in air trick combos, Miles will yell out things like it's lit or bomba. Things of this nature, while not the most major thing in the world, go a long way in the line of generating a level of authenticity and life to these characters that as a person of color we don't often get to see, and especially in a positive manner like this where the main character is a hero. The cumulative effect of this makes it mean so much more, because as an adult, if I'm feeling represented, you can only imagine the effect it'll have on a child who will see themselves through these characters. My niece, for example, really loved Into the Spider-Verse, and she loved Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider, wanting to be just like her. Now imagine her seeing this game, and seeing these characters, who not only represent her look-wise, but heritage-wise as well. It makes me pretty emotional thinking about it. Yuri Lowenthal returns as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, but his role is very reduced in this game, as this game is Miles, which I appreciate. It's a little weird seeing his new face model on the PS4, but unlike most of the collective hive mind on Twitter, I didn't mind the face change then when it first was announced, and I don't mind it now. I've got to say though, I absolutely enjoy how much of a dork Peter is in this game, and in the last hollow mission you have to do for your spider training stuff Pete leaves behind for you, if it was indeed Ben Arfman who wrote that entire mission, I am sending you a bill for a new gut, because I absolutely shattered mine at how much I was laughing at it. It's that damn good, and Yuri absolutely has a blast in the booth, and it resonates on screen. I cannot say enough good things about that mission. You'll have a blast when you play it, trust me. Aaron Davis is also a part of this game, voice and performance captured by Ike Amadi, and I enjoy how he's written as well. He seems to be more of a hybrid of both comics version and a sprinkle of inspiration from the end of the Spider-Verse. He's still definitely the cool uncle, but a selfish human being only looking out for his best interests. He's a very conflicted character, and I think that's what I enjoy the most about him here, is that he's not just a straight-up bad guy. He has his reasons for what he does and why he's distant from the family, and it's relatable as the repercussions from Jefferson Davis's death in the first game have some major implications and ripple effects throughout the game for him and the rest of the Morales family. There are other characters in this that for the sake of spoilers I can't mention, but they do a phenomenal job, and as mentioned earlier, fall along the same line as Aaron Davis, where they're not necessarily bad people, but they get caught up in their own self-interests, and are so blinded by it that they can't see anything beyond it. If there's one character I feel that somewhat gets the short end of the stick, it's definitely Genki, whose voice and performance captured by Griffin Buatu. While he helps out and contributes to Miles and his journey, including a new ingenious app to help deal with the crime system, in which we'll talk about later, I get this overwhelming sense that Genki could have been more integral to the plot outside of being the tech guy, or basically being Miles' command center, essentially. General plot notes for the game are really positive, however, and much like Spider-Man PS4, a lot of this plot can be very predictable, but as I said in my Avengers review, predictable is not always a bad thing when the execution of it is well done, and in this game, it's done immaculately. And more than anything, I really appreciate the writers not treating most of us like idiots, with surprise reveals that we already saw coming in Act 1 in Act 3. It gets most of the reveals and motivations out of the way very early on, while also striking that delicate balance needed to build character and character attachment early on throughout the course of the game, while also building conflict. I was also surprised to see that this game pulled no punches and had the stones to tackle some very real-life things. There's a particular scene on the bridge that was shown off a few months back during the gameplay demo, and the aftermath of that scene is very reminiscent of what it feels like to be a minority or a person of color living in the US, and again, the immediate reaction during the fallout is authentic to the experience of having to go through something as traumatic as having a gun pointed at you for looking different or dressing different by people who are sworn to protect you, when you're just trying to do the right thing. And kudos to Marvel for allowing this to happen, as it's an important story to tell. I definitely feel like these Roxxon goons were supposed to be proxies for the cops, as the relationship between Spider-Man and the cops in this game is mostly antagonistic, but I have no proof. We've heard stories in the past about Marvel being particularly strict when it comes to things that they don't want in their games, and even in Insomniac's world, I vividly remember watching one of the writers talk about how Bill Roseman himself took one look at a script that had someone mention the word balls in Spider-Man PS4, and he immediately put the kibosh on that. So seeing this in its rawest form being depicted in a franchise as big as Spider-Man is quite the spectacle, to say the least, and I applaud them for telling stories that need to be told, and that some might see as too controversial and shy away from it. Also, pro tip for those going into this game blind, please do the side quests first. It makes the ending of the game so much better. Trust me on this. Gameplay-wise is, man, do we have a lot to talk about here. A lot of this game is very similar to Spider-Man PS4, and if you're familiar with that game, then you'll have an easier time with Miles, as the training wheels are off of sorts. But this game changes a few things up. Some good, some not so good. Web swinging is still the same from the last game, but it feels a lot tighter and responsive thanks to the work of the animation team. Still wish we could do loops, but, well. Tricks, which are very much an important feature this time around, have been given a massive overhaul and lend itself to this overall feeling of smoothness and creativity, as a majority of them transition into web swinging seamlessly, a contrast to Spider-Man PS4's herky-jerky system which, while okay, left a lot to be desired. Expressing yourself via cool tricks in mid-swings or even during dive bombs is useful, as they do fill out the venom meter, which I'll talk about shortly during our deep dive into combat. And speaking of, you can't reliably do it in combat like you could before, which is a bit of a bummer. Styling and profiling has to take a bit of a back seat. The buttons have changed for tricks alongside of a few other things as well, but again, we'll talk about that later. Square is now the primary button to hold down for tricks, replacing triangle and circle from the last game, which isn't a bad change necessarily. Definitely makes things easier on the hands, and if holding down square isn't your cup of tea, you can always change the settings in the options menu, of which there are a ton of accessibility features. This trumps the last game in almost every way and is an awesome feature. Gaming should be for everyone, and I'm super stoked to see developers take steps in implementing things to include everyone in their games. Much of the traversal has largely stayed the same, which can be a bit problematic, I'm looking at you wall crawling, as well as Insomniac's New York, but there is definitely a whole lot more level of detail given to Harlem specifically this time around. And can we just take a second to talk about the lighting in this game? Goodness, it's amazing. Some of the best lighting and shadows I've ever seen in an open world game. From the brisk blue New York City sky to the pleasantly peachy sunset, the lighting is just superb in this game, and some of the best I've ever seen in an open world game. Notably absent, however, is the Chrysler building due to what can only be legal issues. It sucks as it's part of the definitive New York City skyline, but what can you do when someone decides to play hardball? The only real changes to Traversal are some newly implemented Venom abilities like a Venom Jump, which gives you a slight vertical boost, and the Venom Dash, which propels you forward. While neat, I never really use these much in the game during Traversal, as there's never really a moment in which you need to, nor does the game ever really present any challenges or opportunities for it to drill it into your head that these might be handy. On top of that, because they drain your venom meter, it seems almost counterintuitive to use, as at any given moment a random crime can happen and you're suddenly on a venom meter, which you will need to use to make combat encounters easier throughout the open world, but I'm getting ahead of myself. On topic of the open world, activities and crimes have drastically changed this time around in how they're utilized. You still have similar systems in place from Spider-Man PS4, like missions giving you XP in which you can redeem to upgrade your Spider-Man with 3 sets of skill trees, and tokens you can collect from doing things, but they're much more streamlined. No longer do you have to collect 3 sets of tokens for gadget upgrades, suit mods, or even suit unlocks. Although some of those are indeed locked until certain mission requirements or levels are hit, but everything you do goes into only 2 sets of tokens, eliminating the collective groan most players had when being met with a 3rd set of collectible tokens by way of the research stations in Spider-Man PS4. Different activities earn different reward points, therefore making everything you do feel worth it in the long run rather than meeting a checklist. You have tech pieces which are found in underground loot caches scattered throughout the city, and activity tokens which are exactly that. With this streamlined token system, it now allows you to casually collect what you need to hit whatever you need or want throughout your playthrough without stressing too much about how to get it. You can carefully plan your approach and how to do so via the game's ingenious friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app. This system is a massive callback to Spider-Man 2's pedestrian crime system brought to the new tech age, and it's a vastly welcome addition. It allows you to tackle crimes which are mostly the same from Spider-Man PS4 with a sprinkle of new added here and there, and side quests at your own leisure, but it also helps you track which objectives give you more tokens, to again help you out on your quest to further flesh out your Spider-Man. But it doesn't just stop there. It also allows you to respawn said crimes if you missed out on one of the objectives and side missions as well. This is an awesome addition and something I wish the original Spider-Man had, which would have made it a hell of a lot easier to gather review footage for that game. But even the main missions can be replayed via the touchpad menu screens, so again, really big improvements all around on this front. But the thing I enjoyed the most are the side missions. On top of that, there are other collectibles around the city to collect that, just like in Spider-Man PS4, give some context to the overall plot and some background lore to Miles' past. Is that Big Wheel? And of course, combat bases which you can now 100% complete in stealth. Stealth has some improvements as well, albeit very incremental. Because of Miles' ability to go invisible, stealth has a few layers of depth to it now, as well as new additions like roof and wall stealth takedowns, and new gadgets like remote mines add some environmental takedowns to help speed up the pace, offering group takedowns all in one go. The problem with stealth is that once again, it's a little too easy. The AI in this game does not change up strategy at all, nor do they ever look up. They at the very least go calling out and searching for one another after enough goons are taken out and things are quiet, but unless you actively do something to get caught, like overzealously taking out someone in broad daylight, then there's no reason at all why you should ever be getting caught. Midway throughout the game, a Roxxon enemy is introduced to kind of give this illusion that stealth is suddenly about to become a lot harder, as they have a heat sensor on their goggles allowing them to see you while you're cloaked, but it offers nothing to difficulty because again, they never look up. As long as you're on walls or on rooftops and shooting webs toward an area to distract someone, takedowns are pretty easy, and stealth by proxy is never truly challenging. I wish they would take a harder look at how the Arkham series expanded upon their stealth systems, with their AI learning and observing from past takedowns you've done, so that they can't repeatedly get hit with the same tactic over and over again. Things like this Roxxon enemy are a good idea if they're more reactive to their environment and set up things like traps to make it more of a challenge for you. Combat, however, is where I'm the most mixed on. As some of you are well aware, I've played Spider-Man PS4 a bit. Not too much, just a bit. And while I really enjoyed that game's combat system, there are some things I thought could have been improved. Animations were my #1 gripe with Spider-Man PS4. Doing the same repetitive kick melee combo over and over again did get old really fast, and is something that Miles actively took steps forward in correcting, which I'm really happy about. I thought enemy AI, particularly in the DLCs, were over-tweaked on the harder difficulties, with things like whips having these near one-frame grabs that would just come out of nowhere with absurd range, alongside some really aggressive rocket launchers and some web-absorbent enemies who would break out a little too fast for my liking, making some gadgets feel weaker at the expense of feeling like a nerfed version of Spider-Man. In Spider-Sense, while I love the dodging, could at times be really difficult to see due to some of the things going on the screen, or even at times camera placement making it hard to see incoming attacks. While some of these issues have been fixed, like the one-frame whip stuff, others I feel like have gotten worse. We'll start off with Spider-Sense in particular. Miles Morales is a very busy game with a lot going on at any given time. With their new Venom attacks, which are Punch, Dash, Launcher, Ground Pound, and Blast, you'll be installing a lot of status effects on enemies left, right, and center, and the screen gets extraordinarily busy with a lot of amazing visual effects. Not to mention that enemies in this game are much more aggro than they were in Spider-Man PS4, and very grenade-happy, might I add. It's very easy to have sensory overload and get lost in what's happening on the screen, especially with the camera the way that it is in this game, now often shifting to really awkward positions where you can't see what's going on, and this is an issue even with the combat camera turned off. I find myself having the camera oftentimes going behind a wall where I can't see Spider-Man at all, or a really tight corner. And even in a couple of instances during the final fight where I took to air combat, the camera just absolutely did not know where to pan, making things disorienting. Not to mention that the timing on Spider-Sense itself is very inconsistent. And if there's one word I could use to describe the combat in this game, that's it. Inconsistent. Half the time it feels like I should be getting perfect dodges, but they don't register as perfect dodges. Other times enemies just straight up shoot me with no white Spider-Sense indicator to really tell you what's going on and where they're coming from until it hits you. You have enemies at times hitting you in the middle of animations that you just can't cancel out of. And not to mention how they just seemingly attack you in stacks with no multi-dodge in this game. You have this weird buffer time in between doing a regular launcher and web combination where you can't immediately web yank someone down to the ground. The up-close throw you do to certain enemies refuses to kick enemies in the direction you want to, and using gadgets while in travel via web strikes is something that you can no longer do, and there are other issues and inconsistencies like this throughout the combat as well. Even though the game still functions very similarly to Spider-Man PS4's main combat structure, a lot of these inconsistencies made me wonder if things were meant to be this way to make Miles different from Peter, or if perhaps the game had some oversight on the combat side of things. You know, production snafus due to the pandemic and whatnot. Gadgets in this are pretty underwhelming too, and while I feel like that might be by design due to the Venom abilities taking more of a presence in combat, it's still a little disappointing, as one of the funnest things about Spider-Man PS4's combat system was experimentation between combat and gadgetry. And in this game, because you only have 4 gadgets in total, experimentation is at a low. And granted, I may be in the minority here, and I can admit that, but I still think there are some fundamental issues with gadgets not feeling as satisfying as they should be. While things like Gravity Well and Remote Mine combine in on each other relatively well, or even a Venom status enemy with webbing being slammed on the ground for what the game uses as its web bomb replacement is satisfying, that's about it. Hollow Mines to me are near useless. I've never really seen a need to use them in combat, and unless you're someone who struggles with combat, this gadget just seems to kind of take a slot. I think hollow mines would have actually been better utilized in stealth sequences, and they kind of can be, but it doesn't work as well as it should as a distraction technique. Again, to bring up Goggles Dude from earlier, I really think hollow mines could have been used to throw this guy for a loop for some ingenious takedown opportunities. Whipping on the ground is kind of not as fun as it once was. Enemies break out really fast, and like mentioned earlier, unless they're affected by the venom status, all you can really do is incapacitate a few of them for a few seconds at a time before they break out. But the biggest kicker to me is the fact that gadget play just feels like something the game just does not want you to do, at least not often. A lot of the systems that were in Spider-Man PS4 are just not around in this game. The focus meter has been replaced with the venom meter, and finishers are now stacked to how much combo hits you gain in combat. Starting at 15 hits, a finisher will store and will continue to store after every other 15th hit afterward. So, 15 hits for your first, 30 for your second, and so on and so on. This is alright, and I don't mind it, but I know some of the player base that struggles with combat may not enjoy this system too much, as getting to those higher numbers in combat may be a struggle for them. Furthermore, the assets used to help them get to those higher number counts are being significantly reduced. No longer do you earn gadgets back per finisher, it's given back at random per enemies defeated. I personally think this is a massive mistake. I get for the sake of difficulty not wanting gadget spam to be a player crutch, but you're effectively limiting what the player can do in combat, and the system you had before worked so well where you could deplete gadgets and potentially screw yourself over, but if you have enough finishers stored, you could restore them and bail yourself out. Everything combat related seems to be centered around the venom meter, and while I understand why, as it's the shiny new car you want to drive in, and the main gameplay element to make Miles distance himself from feeling too much like Peter, I don't agree with nerfing one element to make the other stronger. Venom abilities are a lot of fun to use. They're insanely fun to use, but they would be even more so if gadgets could be used at a consistent level to allow you to have fun with them even more so. And it doesn't take away from the fact that you still need venom abilities to deal with some of the tougher enemies in this game. A lot of these issues combined in on each other are the reason why I'm so mixed on the combat in this game, and it sucks because I really want to enjoy it, and there are things to enjoy, don't get me wrong, but the issues I have keep dragging me down. I really want to love this system, and it's so close to being there, but it's just not. Not yet. And that's not even talking about suit mods in this game. It's been reworked this time around. You no longer have a super move and 3 suit mods to select from. Your super has been replaced with the Mega Venom Blast instead, and to replace that is an additional mod for your Spider-Man. You get 2 visor mods and 2 suit mods. In the last game I praised it for having a decent variety of mods to allow players to play the way they wanted to. In this game, however, there seems to be an overabundance of defensive related mods, and there's nothing that's really tailored to offensive play. The closest thing we have to a truly offensive mod is the one mod that allows you to go in and gain gadgets back per every melee stealth takedown you make. The problem is that when you're in combat, you're usually not thinking about disengaging with stealth at all, and even if by chance you are, it takes a little while for the enemies to get to a point where that could actually be effective. Thankfully, some late game upgrades in the skill tree allow your combo meter to effectively go on pause when you do go in stealth, and by late game I mean New Game Plus, and I have mixed feelings about this too. While on one hand I'm glad there's something to work toward in New Game Plus, the other makes it so that your first playthrough feels stunted in comparison because you're working so hard to get everything you can only to be met with the brick of reality that is realizing that you can't, and your New Game Plus playthrough is where you'll be able to unlock your full potential. You unlock 3 new things from each tree, including a 3rd finisher slot, a free Mega Blast that restores your health if you get hit with a death blow during combat, and the invisibility no longer killing your combo meter. The 3rd finisher slot is probably the one you feel the most, and it's kind of nuts how this wasn't an upgrade available in the regular playthrough like in Spider-Man PS4. Again though, this game is very heavily defensive based, which is why I suspect a lot of the changes we see here were done intentionally, but some suit mods just give you no advantage whatsoever. For as much as I love the mods that come with the Into the Spider-Verse suit, they're purely cosmetic and offer no gameplay value outside of its looks. It's weird because other suits in the game have unique passive properties that are tied directly to them, but for this suit specifically, we get these mods, which, while cool that we can apply these to every suit in the game, seems more like a handicap given again the very limited options for anything offensive or even certain defensive mods you'd actually like. I'd rather have these as an option in the options menu than suit mods if I'm being quite frank, because while this is awesome, sacrificing half your build for it just seems wrong. Speaking of suits, they're all amazing, and as mentioned earlier, a few of them have a few passive abilities that come out during certain takedown animations, with my favorite of course being the Bodega Cat suit. This stuff is awesome, and you can tell that the devs had a ton of fun creating these. I really hope you guys aren't misconstruing what I'm saying here. I enjoy the combat in this game a lot. I just wish certain things could be better is all. On topic of dev creation, the photo mode in this game is unmatched. The user interface team overall did a bang-up job all around, whether it's the heads-up display, which is much more sleeker than its 2018 counterpart, to the near overwhelming photo mode. There's just so much more that you can do now. It's a shame I haven't spent nearly as much time on this as I would have liked to because I've been so busy with other side projects. For those of you who know me know how much I absolutely loved photo mode in Spider-Man PS4. It's what helped seal the deal for me on that game after being burnt for years with other Spider-Man games again and again. And I don't mean this as an exaggeration, this is without question the best photo mode any Sony first-party game has ever released. From controlling lights that you can manually put in, to moving the sun and moon around, a plethora of new filters, to changing suits in an instant, this is nuts! And I cannot wait to dive deeper into this and create more awesome phone backgrounds for myself when I eventually get the time. Miles Morales as a cross-generational title had no reason to go this hard and be this good, but I am so glad that it is, and like any other good appetizer, it prepares your palate for the full course meal, and I am so excited to see what the future holds for this universe with Spider-Man and Miles. Hopefully in the future we can get a full feature-length title with Miles, much in the same vein of 2018's Marvel Spider-Man. Much like Miles' career as Spider-Man, the future is bright, Spidey fans, and I am all in for this ride. Despite a few flaws here and there, Miles Morales is a must-play game. Whether it's on the PS4 or on the PS5, do yourself the favor, get the game, and be greater, but more importantly, be yourself.